I wish I was making this up, but my neighbor really did call the cops on a plane crash. Let me say that again just so you catch it. Darlene Wickham, Queen of the HOA, actually dialed 911 to report me for allowing unauthorized aircraft on my Texas ranch while the paramedics were still pulling the pilot out of the wreck. That's the level of insanity we're dealing with here. It's 6 a.m. I'm out in my boxers. Yeah, I know, trying to help a young pilot who just crash-landed his Cessna in my back pasture. The kid's bleeding, scared, his wrist is clearly broken, and the air is thick with a stink of hot metal and aviation fuel. The fire department's out there blasting foam on a smoking engine. And what does Darlene do? She marches over all business and starts hollering about property values. You need to get this disgusting junk off your land immediately. It's destroying everyone's home values. She's actually writing up violation notices while the paramedics are strapping the poor kid to a stretcher. I'm just standing there, half awake, mud on my feet, watching this woman wave her clipboard around like it's a magic wand. You have exactly 24 hours to remove this trash, she tells me, or I'm fining you $500 a day. I could have lost my cool. I could have started yelling back. But honestly, I was too tired, and something about the whole situation struck me as funny. So I looked at her real calm and said, "Lady, that's a federal investigator pulling into my driveway right now." I swear, the color drained from her face faster than oil from a busted engine. What Darlene didn't realize in that moment was that her little power trip had just triggered the biggest federal takedown our county had ever seen. You ever wonder what you'd do if your HOA Karen tried to fine you for someone else's emergency? Yeah, me too, until it actually happened. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how does a regular guy end up with a neighbor who thinks she can regulate plane crashes? My name's Garrett Sullivan. I'm 52. I used to turn wrenches on helicopters for the Air Force. Now I run cattle and tinker with old airplanes on a 40-acre patch of Texas that's been in my family since 1890, back when my great-granddad bought it for $200 and a handshake. After 20 years of military life and a divorce that taught me more than I ever wanted to know about solitude, this place became my safe haven. My daily routine's nothing fancy. Coffee steaming in the cool dawn, boots crunching on gravel while I check the fences, cattle shifting around out by the pond. The old barns where I restore vintage planes for collectors who actually care about history. That's all I wanted: quiet, honest work, good land, and neighbors who mostly left each other alone. And for a while I had it. Farmland all around me. The kind of place where folks would stop to help if your truck broke down or bring over pie after a storm. But nothing good stays the same forever. Developers showed up, carving up old cornfields and slapping up rows of McMansions with names like the Hampton and the Charleston. My place got grandfathered in, so the HOA couldn't touch me, at least not legally. Didn't stop some of them from wishing I'd just disappear. Most of the new folks were decent enough. We borrowed tools, shared fence repairs, swapped barbecue recipes. Regular Texas, neighborly stuff. But then, 3 years ago, Darlene Wickham rolled in from Orange County, California, driving a black BMW and acting like she'd just been appointed queen. Blonde highlights that cost more than my monthly truck payment, designer everything, and a smile that could slice cheese when she didn't get her way. Didn't take long for her to schmooze her way into the HOA presidency. In 6 months, she had the whole board eating out of her hand. Within a year, our peaceful neighborhood had turned into her personal fiefdom. She was surgical about it. First, she went after the Ramirezes, an elderly Mexican couple who'd kept a beautiful vegetable garden for decades. Darlene decided their tomatoes and peppers violated landscaping standards. The Ramirezes struggled with the English paperwork, so Darlene started getting nasty, hinting maybe they'd be happier somewhere less regulated. Then it was the Johnsons, a young black family with 2 kids. Their crime? Installing a basketball hoop in their own driveway. Darlene claimed it attracted undesirable activity and lowered property values. Yeah, the undesirable activity Was 8-year-old Marcus shooting free throws after school? You see where this is going? She targeted anyone who didn't fit her sanitized vision of suburbia. Old folks, minorities, working-class families, didn't matter. She'd squeeze them out and make room for better residents. My turn came when she noticed my workshop from the road. Never mind it was hidden by 100-year-old oaks, and set 2 football fields away from her house. She showed up unannounced, heels sinking into my gravel, waving her French manicured hand at my barn. This rusty eyesore needs to go. Painted beige or tear it down. Your choice. I explained as patiently as I could that my land predated her HOA by about a century, so their rules didn't apply. The smell of oil and old leather hung in the air while she stared at me, her perfume almost choking. She just smiled, a smile that promised trouble. We'll see about that. There are ways to deal with uncooperative neighbors. That was 2 years ago. Since then, she's tried everything. Called code enforcement, challenged my tax assessment, called the fire marshal about unsafe fuel storage. None of it stuck because I follow the rules, every single one, state and federal. The morning everything changed started out like any other. Coffee, porch, mist rising off the pond. The air smelled like mesquite smoke, wet grass, and possibility. Then I heard it, a Cessna's engine coughing, low and rough. I looked up just in time to see that little plane gliding in, engine dead, heading straight for my back pasture. The kid flying it couldn't have been more than 23, handled it like a pro. Found flat ground, kept his wings level, touched down softer than I parked my truck. Still, he bounced, skidded a good 200 feet, and ended up by the pond with a metallic sigh. I was already running before the dust settled, first aid kit in hand. "Sir, I'm real sorry about your property," the pilot kept saying, clutching his wrist. "Engine just quit on me. Don't worry about the fence, son. Let's get you patched up first." The next hour was textbook emergency response. Fire trucks, ambulance, sheriff's deputy, even a news chopper overhead. The smell of aviation fuel hung heavy while the paramedics did their job. And then, like a hurricane, Darlene arrived, wearing silk pajamas and slippers that probably cost more than my mortgage. She didn't even look at the pilot. Didn't look at the EMTs. She launched straight into HOA mode. "This is exactly why we have standards," she screeched, gesturing at the twisted Cessna. "I want this eyesore gone, or you're getting fined." Even the paramedics paused, staring at her like she'd lost her mind. The news crew? They couldn't believe their luck. Nothing sells like a real-life Karen meltdown. I tried to keep my cool. "Ma'am, this is federal jurisdiction. The NTSB has to investigate." She went red as a fire hydrant. "I don't care about your government acronyms. This is a family neighborhood, not some backwoods landing strip." The sheriff tried explaining federal law. Darlene just shouted louder. Every second got recorded by the news cameras. A middle-aged woman in designer sleepwear screaming at crash victims while first responders did their jobs. 3 days later, she escalated. A violation notice appeared in my mailbox, HOA letterhead and all. $500 a day in fines, retroactive to Tuesday. Remove the abandoned vehicle, the Cessna, or else. Her little handwritten note at the bottom made her intentions clear. "Perhaps this will help you understand that some people might be happier in less regulated areas." Some people. Right. That night, I found myself at the county law library, surrounded by the smell of old books and burnt coffee. 20 years in the Air Force taught me how to research, and I wasn't about to let Darlene steamroll me. Turns out, Texas property code is real specific about HOA limits. They can't override federal law at all. I copied everything I could, including case law about selective enforcement, basically discrimination dressed up as property management. Knowledge is power, especially when your enemy thinks you're too dumb to fight back. The real bombshell came from an old buddy of mine, Jake, who works for the FAA in Dallas. I called him for advice on the jurisdiction issue, and he surprised me. Funny timing, he said. We got a complaint about your property 3 months ago. Someone claimed you're running an illegal airport endangering the subdivision. My coffee went cold in my hand. 3 months ago? Yeah. Complaint was filed the day of the crash, but hours before. It's like someone knew that plane was coming down. It hit me. Darlene didn't just react to the crash. She'd been planning for it. 5 days later, Darlene called an emergency HOA meeting about aviation safety, invited the local news, and positioned herself as the hero saving the neighborhood from my reckless endangerment. The community center was packed, 40 neighbors, folding chairs, burnt coffee, nervous energy. Darlene's PowerPoint was pure theater. Aerial photos of my land, dire warnings about unregulated aircraft activity. When she finished, she opened the floor for questions. I stood up with my folder of regulations. Mrs. Wickham, I'm curious about your FAA complaint. How'd you know to file safety concerns 3 months before any plane ever landed here? The color drained from her face again. She mumbled something about proactive protection, but the damage was done. Suddenly, folks weren't looking at me. They were looking at her. Afterwards, neighbors started sharing their own Darlene stories. Martha Kowalski, threatened over her husband's memorial garden. Rico Vasquez, cited for his kids' bikes in the driveway. Every target matched a pattern: elderly, minority, working class, or just not Darlene's type. That night, sitting on my porch with the crickets singing, I realized this war was just getting started. But I finally had an edge. The feds were watching her now. Darlene struck back hard. Within a week, she'd hired a Dallas lawyer, Preston Blackwood, the kind with a marble lobby and hourly rates that could fund a small war. The lien notice arrived by certified mail, fat enough to use as a doorstop, threatening property seizure unless I paid $3,500 in violations. Total bluff. I'd seen this before. When someone's throwing fancy paperwork, they're usually hiding the fact that they don't actually have authority. Meanwhile, Darlene started canvassing the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, knocking on doors, warning everyone about my dangerous hobby airport. Think about your children's safety, she'd say, voice all concern and drama. Property values are dropping because of these aviation incidents. Classic manipulation. Create fear, offer a solution. Position herself as the only shield against chaos. And then things got real ugly. My insurance company called. Mr. Sullivan, we've received multiple complaints about negligence, said the adjuster. We're launching a full investigation before renewal. Multiple complaints. I pressed for details. Caller showed unusual knowledge of aviation liability. Another red flag. Most people know insurance like they know rocket science, but someone was feeding my carrier very specific technical concerns. That night, I ended up at Rico's house for an impromptu strategy session. The smell of his wife's pozole filled the air, kids doing homework at the table. My boss pulled me aside, Rico said. Asked if I was having legal troubles that could affect my security clearance. Someone's calling my office, asking about my character. It was spreading. Darlene wasn't just attacking our properties. She was going after our jobs, our reputations, trying to force us out by any means. That weekend, I hit the courthouse again, sifting through property records. What I found would make the FBI drool. 3 houses in the subdivision had sold cheap in the past 18 months after harassment campaigns that matched Darlene's exact playbook. All the buyers? Wickham Holdings, LLC. Every flip, big profit. Darlene was clearing $200,000 per house by targeting vulnerable neighbors, driving them out, and buying low. But it was Rico's call that gave me the final push. 2 guys in suits showed up at my job, said I'm under investigation for insurance fraud and neighborhood disputes. My boss is asking questions I can't answer. Martha got it too. Someone called her grandson's school, claiming she shouldn't volunteer for field trips. It wasn't random harassment. It was systematic isolation, cut you off from your job, your family, your community, then offer you one escape. Sell cheap, leave, disappear. Sunday afternoon. A dozen families gathered in Rico's kitchen. Violation notices and legal threats stacked on the table. She's running a business, I explained, laying out the property acquisition timeline. Harass, intimidate, force cheap sales, flip for profit. We're not neighbors, we're inventory. Martha, retired teacher, spotted the pattern right away. Every family she's targeted is elderly, minority, or working class. This isn't property management. It's demographic engineering. We pooled our resources, scraped together a legal fund. $18,000, 12 families. Not much, but enough to get dangerous. Monday morning, the county tax assessor showed up, with Darlene lurking behind him like a vulture. She'd convinced them I was running commercial aviation operations that needed tax reclassification. They spent 2 hours poking around, Darlene pointing at everything from my workshop to my gravel driveway as evidence. They wanted to search my barn. Without a warrant? Sorry, boys. Darlene exploded, shrieking about obstruction of justice. The tax guy looked like he wanted to disappear. That night, I started documenting everything, photos, video, every violation notice. My old Air Force habits kicked in. When you're surrounded, documentation is your best weapon. Digging deeper, I learned Darlene had pulled the same stunt in 2 other counties, Plano and McKinney, always targeting working-class families near fancy developments. Each time, the same outcome. Harassment, cheap sale, quick flip, big profit. My kitchen looked like a detective's office, files stacked everywhere. Then, Wednesday at 3 a.m., my peaceful ranch turned into an emergency response circus. Fire trucks, ambulances, hazmat crews. Someone had reported a hazardous chemical spill threatening the subdivision's water supply. Chief Bobby Martinez, who I've known since high school, looked embarrassed. Garrett, this is the 5th false emergency call this month. Someone's gaming 911. Security cameras caught Darlene's BMW circling my property at 2:30 a.m., half an hour before the call. The next day, FAA agent Patricia Hayes knocked on my door. 15 years in aviation investigation, sharp as a tack. She sipped my coffee, then laid it out. The complaints about your property use very specific technical language. Terms only an aviation insider would know. Whoever filed them has access to restricted data. Then she dropped the bomb. Mrs. Wickham's ex-husband works for Consolidated Aircraft Insurance. Divorce settlement gave her access to aviation databases. She's been threatening him to provide technical data for these complaints. Darlene wasn't just lucky, she had inside help. Friday, process servers delivered lawsuit papers to 8 houses at once. Defamation, conspiracy, interference with business operations, totaling millions in damages. Classic slap suits, meant to bankrupt us with legal fees, not actually win in court. Martha called, crying. Garrett, they want $400,000. My grandson's college fund. Everything I have. But Darlene made a mistake, filing these lawsuits while under federal investigation. The paper trail proved systematic witness intimidation. Agent Hayes called it prosecutorial gold. That evening, sitting on my porch, Rico texted, "Neighbors want to fight back. Ready when you are." We weren't backing down anymore. Saturday, at the courthouse, I found the smoking gun. Wickham Holdings had over $340,000 in tax liens, plus personal liens against Darlene for 3 straight years. The woman lecturing everyone about standards hadn't paid her own taxes since moving to Texas. Business filings showed she'd been claiming tax exemptions on properties she was flipping. Straight-up tax fraud. That afternoon, Agent Hayes called. "Meet me at Murphy's Diner." She slid a folder across the table. Darlene's complaints contained restricted NTSB data, tail numbers, engine analysis, information only federal agencies get. Her ex-husband's insurance login was the source. The conspiracy was federal now: mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, witness intimidation. RICO charges were next. And then, the final piece. Rico's wife's cousin provided bank records. Every HOA fine collected from targeted families went straight into Wickham Holdings accounts, funding property buys. Darlene had weaponized the HOA, using fines to bankroll her real estate empire. Even worse, she was double-dipping on taxes, claiming both HOA income and real estate expenses. Martha studied her timing. She targets one family every 6 months, always when property taxes are reassessed. Maximizes financial pressure, minimizes suspicion. It all fit. This wasn't random. It was a criminal enterprise, combining tax fraud, discrimination, and federal crimes into a profitable package. But here's the hope. Once criminals are fighting federal charges, they can't go after you with civil lawsuits. Darlene was vulnerable for the first time. Sunday morning, my barn became mission control. Evidence boxes everywhere. Timelines on the workbench. The smell of coffee and adrenaline. Martha arrived first, color-coded folders in hand. Rico brought his laptop. "We need a real lawyer," I said. Martha already had a name. Rebecca Santos, civil rights attorney from Austin. Specializes in systematic harassment. Monday, I expected to leave a voicemail. Instead, Santos picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Sullivan, I've been following your story. This is textbook Fair Housing Act violation." She broke down the law for me. Selective enforcement against elderly, minority, or working-class families. That's federal discrimination, no matter how it's dressed up. Best part? If we won, defendants paid all legal fees plus damages. Tuesday, Santos drove up, set up shop in Martha's living room, and went through our evidence. "You've documented selective enforcement better than most professionals manage in years," she said. "Rico set up an encrypted network to keep our plans private." Martha turned nervous neighbors into confident witnesses, coaching testimony over coffee. Wednesday, we filed federal civil rights charges. 23 plaintiffs, $2.8 million in damages, systematic discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. Thursday, Santos requested emergency injunctions to halt all harassment while the lawsuit played out. "Witness intimidation is career-ending for defendants," she said. "Courts protect communities aggressively." The legal education was eye-opening. Federal housing law doesn't just cover rentals. It protects anyone targeted for age, race, national origin, disability. Darlene had violated multiple statutes at once. Agent Hayes coordinated her criminal case with our civil one. Criminal charges for Darlene. Civil lawsuit for community recovery. It was a perfect pincer move. Friday, we got the litigation timeline. Discovery in 4 months. Depositions in 60 days. Trial early next year. But the real leverage was Darlene's criminal exposure. She couldn't pursue her lawsuits while defending herself from the feds. That night, I sat on the porch. The cattle settled in the distance. Kids played in the subdivision. And for the first time, I felt hope. We'd gone from victims to organized opposition, with the law on our side. Darlene was about to find out what happens when you pick a fight with the wrong neighbors. 2 weeks after we filed those federal charges, Darlene lost whatever grip she had left on reality. The gloves came off. She dropped any pretense of community management and went straight to psychological warfare. Suddenly, private investigators started popping up on our street. Black sedans parked on corners. Men with cameras snapping photos every time I drove to town or Rico took his kids to school. Martha even caught one of them following her down the grocery aisle, scribbling notes about what brand of cereal she bought. It was like living in a cheap spy movie, except nobody was getting paid enough for this level of crazy. Rico noticed the surveillance first. "Garrett, there's a gray Honda outside. Same guy, 3 days running. He's got a telephoto lens." We'd wave at them, sometimes offer coffee, just to let them know we weren't intimidated. Didn't mean it wasn't getting to us. Martha's hands would shake sometimes when she told me about the men watching her house. But the sabotage campaign, now that was pure malice. My fence got cut in 3 places overnight, cattle wandering loose at dawn, neighbors furious about property damage and traffic hazards. Martha's Memorial Garden. 30 years of careful tending. Gone, uprooted and scattered. Rico's boys couldn't keep a basketball hoop standing for more than a night. Every morning, a new accident. Posts knocked over, padlocks smashed, flower pots dumped out. We filed police reports. We knew who was behind it. But proving Darlene's involvement? Like catching smoke. Then Agent Hayes called. Mr. Sullivan, her ex-husband, finally gave a full statement. Darlene blackmailed him for months, threatened to report him for leaking confidential information if he didn't help her file technical complaints. He was terrified. Suddenly, everything made sense. Darlene hadn't just lucked into all that aviation data. She'd orchestrated it, step by step, using every connection she could exploit. The case ballooned. RICO charges. Mail fraud. Wire fraud. Filing false reports. The works. Hayes was building a federal prosecution, and Darlene was the star defendant. But Darlene wasn't done. She went online, creating fake neighborhood safety pages, photoshopping pictures to make it look like my property was a busy airport, posting testimonials from invented parents who were terrified for their children. RICO traced the accounts back to the same IP address, sloppy, but effective enough to scare the uninformed. You'd think, at this point, the community would fracture. But something else happened. People started looking out for each other. Martha organized carpools so nobody went to court alone. RICO set up neighborhood watches, rotating shifts to keep an eye on houses. The kids? They adapted faster than we did. Playdates turned into adventure games, spies, and secret missions to outsmart the adults causing trouble. The stress got to Darlene. Neighbors saw her pacing her yard late at night, yelling on the phone. She started showing up at city offices in person, making scenes. Her inner circle shrank. Even people who'd once been in her corner began keeping their distance. And then she tried to bribe city council members. She offered contracts to anyone who'd push for emergency aviation restrictions targeting my property. She even offered RICO's employer a fat HOA maintenance contract if they'd fire him for character issues. Her boldest move? She offered Martha a memorial scholarship in her husband's name if Martha would recant her testimony and drop out of the lawsuit. It was so obvious, it almost felt pathetic. Her desperation backfired. Council members, even her lawyer, began backing away. Agent Hayes called with the update I'd been waiting for. Grand jury indictments are in mail fraud, wire fraud, extortion, witness tampering. No plea deals on the table. Sitting on my porch that night, I listened to the cattle, the sound of kids playing, the creak of the porch swing. We'd survived the worst. But Darlene wasn't quite finished. Monday morning, Agent Hayes called, sounding worried. Mr. Sullivan, she's offering bribes, cash payments, promises to drop charges, for people to withdraw from a lawsuit. The FBI has her on tape. Martha got offered $50,000 to remember things differently. RICO got $75,000 plus immigration assistance for his parents if he'd claim everything was a misunderstanding. Then the bombshell. She's coordinating with accomplices in 3 counties, Hayes said. We've identified 47 families targeted by similar schemes over the last 5 years. What started as one crazy neighbor's crusade was actually a networked criminal operation, fraud, intimidation, forced displacement, all funded by HOA money and real estate flips. Thursday at 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Hazmat teams coming, Chief Martinez told me. Anonymous tip about explosives in your workshop. SWAT bomb squad feds. My place turned into a crime scene for nothing. Security cameras showed Darlene's BMW leaving 30 minutes before the call. Filing false terrorism reports. That's a felony, too. RICO dug deeper into her digital footprint. She was using demographic data, targeting elderly, minorities, working-class folks, and military vets. not random harassment. Social engineering, designed to flip neighborhoods, shift school districts, maximize property values for certain buyers. The whole thing made me sick. But Darlene's network was collapsing. HOA board members resigned. Her lawyers dropped her. Even her family wouldn't show up in public with her. She started showing up in public places, screaming about conspiracies and federal overreach. She was unraveling, and everyone saw it. Sunday night, Agent Hayes called. "We have her on tape planning to plant evidence, trying to frame you for terrorism." Monday morning, the feds moved in. 17 felony indictments, federal agents everywhere. The reign of terror was over. That evening, the city council called a special meeting on neighborhood aviation safety. The place was packed, 200 people, news crews, half the FBI. Darlene strutted in, decked out in another one of those outfits that screamed money. She delivered her usual PowerPoint, complete with fake data, made-up testimonials, scare tactics. When questions opened, I stood up. "Mrs. Wickham, can you explain how you filed FAA complaints 3 months before any airplane ever landed here?" She sputtered. The room turned cold. Then Agent Hayes took the mic. "Mr. Sullivan's property is fully compliant with all regulations. The complaints were filed using restricted federal data by someone engaged in criminal activity." Darlene's attorney tried to step in. Hayes held up a hand. "Mrs. Wickham has filed false reports, intimidated witnesses, and committed real estate fraud." The crowd erupted. Reporters scribbling, neighbors whispering, council members looking for the exits. That's when Rebecca Santos stepped forward. "I represent 23 families who've been targeted. Tonight's presentation is just one more piece of harassment, part of a criminal enterprise." She laid out the evidence: housing discrimination, tax fraud, witness intimidation. One by one, every piece fell into place. Darlene snapped. "This is a witch hunt. You're all sheep, letting undesirable elements destroy our neighborhood values." That was the moment the mask slipped. The whole room heard it. The discrimination was undeniable. Agent Hayes approached the podium. "Darlene Wickham, you are under arrest for mail fraud, wire fraud, filing false reports, and conspiracy to commit civil rights violations." The handcuffs went on in total silence, except for the sound of camera shutters. Her attorney abandoned her. The crowd started to clap, spontaneous, relieved, a release of years of tension. Martha wiped away tears. Rico hugged his kids. Council members apologized for not acting sooner. Outside, neighbors hugged, kids laughed. People lingered long after, finally feeling safe. Darlene got 18 months in federal prison and had to pay $2.4 million in restitution. Her company collapsed. Fraudulent home sales were reversed. Families got their houses back. Our civil rights lawsuit settled for $50,000 per family. Legal fees paid by the defendants. More important, the HOA got new oversight. No more secret fines or targeted harassment. The biggest win wasn't the money. It was watching fear turn to friendship. Martha's Memorial Garden became a community meeting spot. Rico got promoted at work. His kids' basketball games brought neighbors together, folks cheering who'd never spoken before. My restoration business picked up. People wanted to support someone who'd stood up to a bully. We used our settlement money to start a community justice scholarship, helping families across Texas learn their legal rights and fight HOA harassment. Martha organizes the program. Rico made bilingual resources for non-English speakers, and I teach rural landowners about property law. Our strategies spread across the state. 3 more fraud schemes got busted, and Texas passed new HOA oversight laws inspired by our case. Agent Hayes got a commendation. Rebecca Santos won awards for civil rights advocacy. National organizations studied our story as a model for resisting institutional abuse. We hold a community celebration every year now, Resilience Day. Rico mans the grill, Martha bakes pies, and we invite families from all over who fought their own battles. Kids play, adults share stories, and there's no fear, just laughter, food, and the comfort of solidarity. Darlene's old house now belongs to a military family, welcomed like old friends. Evening walks mean waves and smiles, not nervous glances. Property values rebounded. Buyers actually appreciate a strong, united community. You want the real lesson? Individual courage plus community support beats systematic abuse every time. You don't have to be a lawyer or a politician. You just have to document, organize, and refuse to be intimidated. Looking back, that plane crash was the worst thing that ever happened to us. Not because of chaos, but because it forced us to stop accepting abuse as the price of homeownership. We changed the law, but more importantly, we changed ourselves, from scared, isolated targets to neighbors who'd fight for each other. So here's my challenge. Share your story. You're not alone. You're not powerless. And you sure as hell don't have to accept harassment as the price of living where you want to live. Ordinary people can beat corruption if they stick together.